A rich cowboy asked the homeless girl, "Can I buy you?" Her answer shook his life. In the small town of Dry Creek, everyone knew the name Caleb Mercer. He was the richest cowboy for miles around. His ranch was so big that people said you could ride for hours and still not see the end of it. He owned strong horses, wide lands, and more cattle than anyone could count. If something was for sale, Caleb could buy it without thinking twice. People greeted him when he passed by, tipping their hats politely. But no one really talked to him. He was respected, yes, but not close to anyone. Caleb lived alone in a large wooden house on his ranch, and most evenings were quiet and empty. Caleb believed one simple thing: everything in life had a price. If someone needed help, he gave money. If someone worked for him, he paid them well. If there was a problem, he solved it with gold or land. To him, that was enough. That was how the world worked. At least, that's what he thought. One late afternoon, Caleb rode his horse into town. The sky was painted orange and gold, and the wind carried dust across the road. It was a normal day, just like any other, but something was about to change. As Caleb stepped down from his horse near the general store, his eyes fell on someone sitting near the wooden stairs. It was a girl. She looked young, maybe 17 or 18. Her clothes were old and worn, and her shoes were nearly falling apart. Her hair was a little messy, but her face was calm. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't looking at people as they walked by. She just sat there quietly. That caught Caleb's attention. Most people in her situation would beg or try to get help, but she didn't. She sat with her back straight, as if she still had something important, even if she had nothing else. Caleb walked closer. "You need something?" he asked in a calm voice. The girl slowly looked up at him. Her eyes were clear and steady, not weak or afraid. "I need a place where people don't look through me," she said. Caleb was not expecting that answer. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he gave a small nod, thinking in his usual way. "I can help you," he said. "Everything has a price." The girl didn't move. She just watched him. Caleb continued, "Can I buy you?" To Caleb, it was a simple offer. He meant he could give her money, a place to stay, maybe work at his ranch. In his mind, he was offering a solution, just like he always did. But the street grew quiet. A few people nearby stopped walking. The shopkeeper looked out from the door. Even the wind seemed to slow down. The girl stood up slowly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared either. She simply looked at Caleb, like she understood something he didn't. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Caleb had made many deals in his life. He had bought land, animals, and even people's loyalty. No one had ever looked at him like this before. It made him feel strange. "Do you always talk like that?" the girl asked softly. Caleb frowned a little. "Like what?" "Like people are things," she said. That answer stayed in the air between them. Caleb crossed his arms slightly. "I'm offering help." "And I didn't ask to be owned," she replied. Her voice was calm, but strong. Caleb felt something he had not felt in a long time. Confusion. He studied her again. She had nothing. No home, no money, no support. Yet she stood in front of him like she had something more valuable than all his land. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena," she said. "Where are you from?" "Different places," she answered. None of them stayed. Caleb didn't fully understand her words, but he could tell one thing. This girl had lived a hard life. Still, she didn't look broken. That surprised him the most. Caleb took a slow breath. He wasn't used to being unsure of what to say. Then, without thinking too much, he spoke again. "I can give you work," he said. "At my ranch. Food. A place to sleep. Fair pay." Lena looked at him carefully. This time, her eyes were softer but still strong. "I'll work," she said, "but I won't belong to you." Caleb almost smiled, but it was a confused smile. "I don't need you to belong to me," he said. Lena gave a small nod. But deep inside, Caleb knew something had already changed, because for the first time in his life, someone had refused to be something he could buy. And he didn't know what that meant yet, but he was about to find out. The next morning, the ranch felt different. Caleb Mercer stood outside his house, watching the sun rise over his land. The fields looked the same, the horses moved the same, and the workers started their day as usual. But something was not the same. Lena had arrived. She came early, walking through the ranch gate with quiet steps. She carried nothing except a small cloth bag. No one noticed her at first, but when they did, they looked at her with curiosity. Some workers whispered, "Who is she? Why is she here?" Caleb stepped forward. "She'll be working here," he said calmly. That was enough. No one asked more questions. Lena didn't speak much. She simply nodded and began to work. At first, Caleb watched her closely. He expected her to struggle. After all, ranch work was not easy. It was long, tiring, and required strength. But Lena surprised him. She worked without complaining. She carried water, cleaned the stable, and helped feed the horses. She didn't rush, and she didn't slow down either. She worked in her own steady rhythm. And something else was different. She didn't act like she was afraid of losing the job. Most workers were careful around Caleb. They followed every order quickly, always trying to please him. But Lena was not like that. She listened, but she also thought. Later that day, Caleb saw her standing near the fence, watching the workers in the field. "Something wrong?" he asked. Lena turned slightly. "Why do they work longer hours in winter?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Because the days are shorter. There's more to finish." She looked back at the field. "But they look more tired." "They get paid," Caleb replied. Lena nodded slowly. "Yes, but being paid doesn't mean being treated right." Her words were simple, but they stayed with him. Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't used to someone questioning him. Not like this. Not calmly, without fear. That evening, the workers gathered for dinner. It was a normal routine. They sat in groups, ate their food, and talked quietly. Lena sat alone at first. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the older workers, a man named Tom, walked over and sat beside her. "You're new," he said. Lena gave a small smile. "Yes." "Work's not easy here," Tom added. "I didn't expect it to be," she replied. Tom nodded. "Most don't last long." "I will," Lena said softly. There was something in her voice, something calm and certain. Tom seemed to notice it too. Soon others joined them. Slowly, Lena became part of the group, not because she tried, but because she listened. She didn't talk much, but when she did, people paid attention. Caleb watched all this from a distance. He didn't understand it. She had nothing. No money, no position, no power. Yet people were drawn to her. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about her words. Being paid doesn't mean being treated right. The next morning, he walked through the ranch earlier than usual. He saw Lena again, this time with the horses. She stood near one of the wild horses, gently placing her hand near its neck. The horse didn't move away. It stayed calm, almost as if it trusted her. "That horse doesn't like people," Caleb said as he approached. Lena didn't look surprised. "It doesn't like force," she said, "but it understands calm." Caleb watched closely. "How did you learn that?" he asked. "I had nothing once," she said. "So I learned to listen instead of control." Those words hit deeper than he expected. Caleb had always controlled things, his land, his work, his life. But Lena, she didn't control anything. Yet somehow things worked around her. That confused him. Later that day, something small happened, but it stayed in Caleb's mind. One of the younger workers dropped a heavy tool and looked nervous. He quickly picked it up, glancing toward Caleb, expecting anger. But before Caleb could say anything, Lena spoke. "It's all right," she said kindly. "Just be careful next time." The boy relaxed. Caleb said nothing, but he noticed something important. The worker smiled. That was rare. For the first time, Caleb began to see something he had never noticed before. His ranch worked well, but it didn't feel warm. And somehow, Lena was changing that, without trying. That evening, Caleb stood alone, looking over his land. Everything was still his, but for the first time, he felt like something important had been missing all along, and strangely, it wasn't something he could buy. Days turned into weeks at Mercer Ranch, and slowly, everything began to change. Not in a loud way, not in a sudden way, but in small, quiet ways that Caleb could not ignore anymore. The workers laughed more during meals. They spoke more freely, even when Caleb was nearby. The long days still existed, the hard work was still there, but something felt lighter, and at the center of that change was Lena. She never tried to lead anyone. She never told people what to do. But somehow, people listened to her. One afternoon, Caleb found her sitting under a tree, fixing a torn piece of cloth. The wind was soft, and the sky was clear. "You don't rest much," Caleb said as he walked toward her. Lena looked up and gave a small smile. "I rest when I need to." Caleb stood beside her. "You work like you have something to prove." She shook her head gently. "No, I work because I'm thankful." "Thankful?" Caleb repeated, confused. "For this?" Lena nodded. "For a chance. Not everyone gets one." Caleb looked around his ranch. To him, this place was normal. Just work, land, and responsibility. But to Lena, It meant something more. That thought stayed in his mind. Later that day, Caleb made a decision. He called all the workers together in the open yard. They stood in a loose group, curious and a little nervous. It was not common for Caleb to gather everyone like this. He took a breath before speaking. Starting this season, he said, work hours will be shorter in winter, and payments will be on time. No delays. The workers looked at each other in surprise. Tom stepped forward slightly. You mean, no waiting until the end of the season? Caleb shook his head. No waiting. There was silence for a moment. Then, slowly, smiles began to appear. Thank you, sir, someone said. Others nodded. Caleb didn't say anything more. He simply turned and walked away. But inside, something felt different. That evening, he saw Lena again near the fence, watching the sunset. You changed things, she said without looking at him. Caleb stood beside her. Maybe they needed changing. Lena nodded slightly. Or maybe you just needed to see them. Caleb let out a quiet breath. You talk like you've always known this, he said. Lena smiled faintly. No, I learned it the hard way. Caleb looked at her. Tell me. For a moment, Lena stayed silent. Then she spoke slowly. There was a time when I had nothing, she said. No home, no food, no one to help. People looked at me, but they didn't see me. Caleb listened carefully. One day, she continued, someone offered to help me, but not really help. They wanted something in return, something I could not give. She paused. That's when I understood something, she said. If someone helps you only to own you, it's not help. Caleb felt those words deeply, because he remembered his own words that day in town. Can I buy you? For the first time, he felt ashamed of them. I thought I was helping, he said quietly. Lena turned to him. You were. You just didn't understand how. Caleb looked down at his hands. Hands that had built a ranch, made deals, and controlled everything. But they had never truly helped someone. Not like this. I've spent my whole life buying things, he said, solving problems with money. And did it work? Lena asked gently. Caleb thought for a moment. It worked, he said slowly. But it didn't mean anything. That truth felt heavy, but also clear. Lena nodded. That's because meaning isn't something you can buy. The sky turned darker as the sun disappeared. For a while, they both stood in silence. Then Caleb spoke again. For someone who had nothing, he said, you seem to have everything figured out. Lena smiled softly. Not everything, just the important things. Caleb looked at her, really looked this time. She still wore simple clothes. She still had no money, no land, no title. But she had something he had never had. Peace. That night, Caleb sat alone in his house. The walls felt less empty than before, but his thoughts were full. He remembered every deal he had made, every decision, every moment he had chosen money over understanding. For years, he thought he was building a strong life, but now, he wasn't so sure. Because the strongest thing he had seen was a girl who owned nothing, and yet could not be bought. And deep inside, Caleb knew one thing for certain. His life was changing. Not because he lost something, but because he was finally beginning to understand what truly mattered. Spring arrived slowly at Mercer Ranch. The cold winds became softer, the fields turned green again, and the long days felt lighter. Everything looked fresh, like the land itself had taken a deep breath. But the biggest change was not in the land. It was in Caleb Mercer. He was not the same man anymore. He still worked hard. He still managed the ranch. But now, he listened more. He spoke calmly. He noticed things he had never noticed before. When a worker looked tired, he asked why. When someone made a mistake, he didn't react quickly. And for the first time in many years, people were not just working for him. They were working with him. The ranch felt different now, warmer, livelier. And at the center of it all was Lena. But Lena had not changed. She was still quiet, still calm, still strong in her own simple way. One early morning, Caleb walked outside and saw her standing near the gate, holding her small cloth bag. Something felt different. You're leaving, Caleb said. It was not a question. Lena turned and gave a small nod. Yes. Caleb walked closer. Why? She looked around the ranch, the fields, the horses, the workers beginning their day. This place doesn't need me anymore, she said softly. Caleb shook his head. That's not true. Lena smiled gently. It is. There was no sadness in her voice, only calm understanding. Caleb felt something heavy in his chest. For the first time, he didn't want someone to leave. You can stay, he said. You'll always have a place here. Lena looked at him carefully. Before, she said, you offered me a place like a deal. Caleb lowered his eyes slightly. And now, he asked. Now, she said, you're offering it with respect. Those words meant more to him than he expected. Then stay, Caleb said quietly. Not as a deal, just stay. Lena looked toward the open road beyond the gate. There are other places like I was, she said. Other people who need someone to remind them they matter. Caleb understood. She was never meant to stay in one place. She was meant to move forward, just like she had helped him move forward. He nodded slowly. Then I won't stop you. Lena stepped closer. You don't need me anymore, she said again. Caleb looked at her. I still have a lot to learn, Lena smiled. You've already learned the most important thing. And what is that? He asked. She took a step back, toward the gate. That people are not things, she said, and respect is not something you can buy. Caleb felt those words deeply, because now, he truly understood them. Lena opened the gate and stepped outside. The morning light fell across the road, bright and clear. She paused for a moment and looked back. Take care of what you've built, she said. Caleb nodded. I will. And don't forget what it means, she added. I won't, he replied. Then, without another word, Lena turned and began walking down the road. Her steps were steady, just like the first day he saw her. Caleb stood there, watching her go. He didn't try to stop her, because he knew some people were not meant to be kept. They were meant to change lives, and then move on. As Lena disappeared into the distance, Caleb felt something new. Not loss, but gratitude. He turned back toward the ranch. Workers were already moving, horses were being prepared, and the day had begun. But now, everything felt different. Not because the ranch had changed, but because he had. Later that day, Caleb walked through the fields. He stopped near a group of workers and spoke with them, not as a boss, but as a person. They smiled. And this time, the smiles felt real. That evening, Caleb stood alone looking at the sunset. For years, he had believed that everything in life had a price, but now, he knew the truth. Some things were beyond money, respect, dignity, trust, and a life that meant something. These were things no one could buy. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Mercer was no longer the richest man because of what he owned. He was rich because of what he had finally learned. And that was something no one could ever take away.